In the case surrounding the death of the legendary Gene Hackman, a key piece of evidence opened up unexpected twists: his final call. What initially seemed like a moment of panic, this brief message contained crucial details that helped investigators uncover the truth behind Gene Hackman's tragic death. Join us as we delve into this investigation, exploring how a short call helped unravel the mystery and point to the real cause of this legend's departure. If you're curious to follow the untold details of the case, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos. Share your thoughts in the comments and join us on this journey to uncover the truth. Chapter 1. The Key of Silence. When silence becomes deafening. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's home had never been a place of loud noise. In his final years, Hackman lived in seclusion in the peace of Santa Fe, where sunlight filtered through old window panes, and every corner of the house was imbued with the scent of aged wood, the smell of time, gently covering every memory with a layer of green moss. However, the silence that enveloped the house since that fateful day was no longer the peaceful harmony it once was, but a heavy quiet filled with fear, a suffocating stillness, as though it was blocking every breeze that might reveal an event too indescribable to express. On that day, the first to break the wall of silence wasn't Gene Hackman, nor Betsy Arakawa, nor a neighbor or acquaintance. It was a plumber, a stranger who came to carry out a simple task. He was the first to notice something unusual. He wasn't a cop, certainly not a fortune teller, but the chill that ran down his spine when his hand touched the slightly open front door would haunt him for the rest of his life. The heavy walnut door, always kept firmly closed, was an unbreakable rule for Hackman, a man who believed in control and doors that were always locked. Yet, on that day, it was ajar, as if someone had hurriedly left or abandoned an unfinished journey. There were no signs of forced entry, no strange marks on the floor, no broken glass. But the eerie silence in the house made the worker stop, pull out his phone, and dial 911. The first call didn't come from Gene, nor from Betsy, but from a stranger. His voice trembled as he spoke to the dispatcher, unclear whether it was from fear or some invisible sensation that had crawled up his spine. The smell of damp wood filled the air, mingling with the scent of cold, unfinished food, a sign of meals left incomplete. Shaky hands had placed the food on the table, but never lifted them again. On the porch, the water bowls for the 3 dogs, Bear, Nikita, and Xena, were still full, but their familiar shapes were nowhere to be found. Gene Hackman was known for his extreme caution. He never left a door open, not even a small crack. The door, slightly ajar that day, felt like a silent message, a small sign left by someone to remind outsiders that behind that door, everything had spiraled out of control. All the outdoor security cameras were functioning normally, but strangely, the video footage from 36 hours before the 911 call was made was completely empty. There were no images, no sounds, no data, like everything that happened on that fateful night had been erased by an invisible hand. The maintenance worker didn't dare step inside. He stood at the threshold, looking down the dark hallway that stretched into the heart of the house, where the faint light from the back window revealed small dog footprints on the tile floor. These footprints scattered, as if Bear, Nikita, and Xena had frantically run around the house, chasing something or someone indefinable. Time in the house seemed to stand still, but an overwhelming sense of urgent desperation hung in the air, like a breathless note in the sorrowful symphony of fate. As the worker turned away, he felt himself trembling, not from the late winter chill, but from the strong intuition that he had just inadvertently opened the final door to the secret Gene Hackman had kept hidden in the last days of his life. The slightly ajar door didn't just open to the house, it opened to the silent hell in the life of a legend. Chapter 2. The Window to Terror. The fearful whisper of the worker echoed. Santa Fe, a quiet afternoon with the sun casting long streaks of light down the gravel road leading to Gene Hackman's house. No one could have imagined that this absolute calm concealed a nightmare churning deep behind the silent wooden door. The plumber, thinking he was merely stopping to fix a small issue, had unknowingly become the first witness to a tragedy even the boldest scripts wouldn't dare write. Gripping the cold wrench, the middle-aged man circled the house, searching for signs of life. After a moment's hesitation at the threshold, he couldn't bring himself to enter. Something was terribly wrong. Too quiet, too unsettling, as if something was clinging to every corner, every crevice. The instincts of an ordinary worker weren't enough to identify the feeling he was experiencing, but the rapid breaths and the pounding of his heart echoed in his ears, speaking volumes. He moved toward the back of the house, past the large window leading into the living room where Gene Hackman often sat, lost in a book under the warm light. What he saw took his breath away. Betsy Arakawa, the small woman with the gentle smile, lay there, motionless, her eyes wide open but no longer recognizing the world around her, like a tragic wax figure in the coziest room of Santa Fe. "Damn it! Damn it! Oh, damn it!" The man's voice shattered with each breath. He stepped back, his hands trembling as he searched for his phone in the pocket of his coat. His fingers were icy, not from the wind, but from the primal fear that had struck his nerves. Fear only those who have touched the door of death could understand. The 911 call echoed in the vast emptiness of the American West. Words chopped, stammered, chaotic. A stream of disordered language as the human mind was pushed to its breaking point. The dispatcher on the other end had heard countless emergency calls, but the way that voice slipped between fear and utter despair sent a chill down her spine. I saw someone in Hackman's house. Oh, damn it. She was just lying there. Oh, damn it. The fragmented pieces of the story tangled together, overlapping with heavy breaths and the sound of footsteps retreating from the window, as if the person feared that by standing too close, a cold hand would reach out from within and drag him into hell along with Gene and Betsy. When the Santa Fe police received the report, they never imagined that one of the most horrifying cases in local history would be ignited from the very house of Hollywood legend, Gene Hackman. This town was too small to hold such tragedies. The locals were used to land disputes, stolen trucks, or a few drunken brawls. No one was prepared for the scene the investigators would find when they stepped through the slightly ajar wooden door. Betsy lay on the carpet, her arm limp, her eyes wide open, but without any sign of extreme fear on her face. That only made everything more confusing. She hadn't struggled, hadn't resisted. There were no signs of a fight. She simply lay there, as if she had surrendered to something. Something she had known, something she had predicted, something that had made the strong woman not even attempt to run. Outside the window, the maintenance worker stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the body through the glass. It felt as though Betsy was still watching him, through the cold pain, across the boundary between life and death. By the time the police arrived, the house had been sealed off. But the real mystery, the most horrifying part, wasn't in the living room where Betsy lay. It was what awaited behind the closed door at the end of the hallway. Gene Hackman's office, where his final call had been made, where the real story was just beginning. Chapter 3, The Final Call. What did Gene Hackman say? The old phone was found right beside Gene Hackman's body, lying askew in the corner of the cold mudroom, as if it too had witnessed the final moments of the man who once stood at the pinnacle of Hollywood. A thin layer of dust on the screen was wiped away by someone's finger, revealing hasty usage, unsent messages, missed calls, and amidst the chaos, one call had been made, Gene Hackman's final call. A leaked source from an anonymous investigator revealed that Gene Hackman made a call before collapsing. Not a random call, not a lengthy conversation. It was very brief, just a few seconds. But every word spoken from the phone Gene gripped in his hand became an obsession, even for the most seasoned investigators. "I can't breathe. Something's wrong with Betsy." A simple sentence, but heavy with meaning. According to sources, Gene's voice had grown hoarse, his breaths uneven, as if each word had to fight against the pain tightening around his chest. The investigator listened to the recording extracted from the switchboard over and over, analyzing each breath, every long pause between his words. In Gene's voice, there was an underlying fear. A feeling only those who have witnessed war, those who have survived near-death experiences, truly understand. Gene Hackman, who had tirelessly worked on film sets, standing alongside great names and playing powerful roles, unafraid of both heaven and hell, found his voice trembling like a child in his final moments. Was it because he felt that this time everything was different? Why did Gene mention Betsy in that call? Investigators believe this is the most crucial clue. He didn't call to report danger to himself, but to mention Betsy, the woman who had been by his side for decades. This shows that in his final moments, Gene wasn't thinking about himself. He was worried about Betsy. He sensed that something was wrong with her, even before the crisis unfolded with him. A strange detail was revealed from the sound analysis. Interspersed between Gene's fragmented words was the sound of a dog barking in the distance, possibly from the bathroom where Betsy was found. This reinforced the theory that Gene had sensed something was wrong with his wife, perhaps a sign of a health crisis or some unusual event unfolding right before him. And then, as he tried to call for help, he too fell into a state of danger. Investigators were seriously considering whether the call had been interrupted by a medical factor, such as a sudden heart attack or an acute symptom, or if there had been some external interference. But from any angle, this final call wasn't just a cry for help from a husband worried about his wife. It could also be a final testament, the last key to unlocking the truth about what really happened in that cold $3.8 million mansion. Another source from the telecommunications center revealed a chilling detail. Before the line cut off, there was a long, drawn-out breath, unclear whether it was Gene or someone else in the house. It wasn't the breath of someone trying to catch their breath, but rather like the exhale of someone taking their final breath, an unmistakable sound, one that haunted every investigator who heard it. What terrified everyone wasn't just what Gene said, but what he never had the chance to say. Something had happened between Gene and Betsy, something only they could understand. And when the final call was made, it wasn't just the fading voice of a legend. It was the sound of a buried secret, a secret that might never be revealed. Outside the house where the two bodies were found, the light of Santa Fe stretched on as usual. But for those who knew about Gene Hackman's last call, that light was just a thin veil concealing the storm of truth that was about to sweep everything away. If you find the story of Gene Hackman's death interesting and captivating, leave a comment with the number 1. If not, leave a comment with the number 0. Now, let's dive into the next developments of the story. Chapter 4. Pills, Prescriptions, and Unanswered Questions. The white, yellow, and blue pills were scattered across the table, spilling onto the floor like pieces of a puzzling riddle. Among them, a single open bottle lay on its side, the label still clearly visible with the doctor's name, the patient's name, and small dosage warnings. The investigators sat there for a long time, their eyes scanning every word, every mark left on the surface of the bottle, desperately trying to find any clue that could answer the most haunting question: what really happened to Gene and Betsy Hackman? There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence of forced entry, no screams or crashing sounds heard from neighbors in the 24 hours before the two bodies were discovered. And most importantly, there were no external wounds on either of the couple. Investigators had to return to the scattered pills on the table. They weren't just physical evidence, but fragments of the mental turmoil of an elderly couple who had spent nearly 30 years together, witnessing glory, storms, and undercurrents that no one else had ever known. Gene Hackman, who had stood at the pinnacle of the film industry, appeared before millions with a tough exterior, had actually lived with a weak heart for many years. His heart condition wasn't a secret to those closest to him. Treatments, prescriptions, regular checkups, and mornings when he sat quietly on the porch, gently stroking his wedding ring as if searching for the final piece, all of it was documented in the medical records collected by the police. However, there was one thing not mentioned in any records: Betsy's psychological instability. The woman who always smiled in photos with her husband had actually fallen into unanticipated bouts of depression. Close friends recalled that Betsy would often sit for hours by the window, her gaze fixed outside, occasionally bursting into tears for reasons unknown. After Gene announced his retirement, the spotlight faded, and their large home in Santa Fe became a sealed box where two aging souls were trapped in long, suffocating days. The investigators carefully examined each pill. Some antidepressants listed in Betsy's medical records, some heart medications for Gene. But among them there were strange pills, unlabeled and of uncertain origin. Who brought them into the house? Who opened that final bottle? At the first meeting of the investigation team, the hypothesis of a drug overdose was brought to the table, but something didn't add up. Older, reclusive couples with limited social interaction rarely fall into the tragedy of overdosing like young Hollywood stars. A sophisticated poisoning? A medication mix-up due to memory loss? Or could it have been Gene, in a moment of desperation, who opened that bottle himself? The biggest question still hung in the air of the Santa Fe police meeting room. Gene and Betsy. Who took the first pill? And as that pill slid down their throats, what did it carry with it? A plan carefully laid out in advance, or simply a fateful mistake? As the forensic team carefully gathered the remaining pills, the late sunlight streamed through the window, casting light onto the corner of the table where an open bottle of medication lay still, like a mute witness. In that dim light, it almost seemed as though two faint shadows lingered. Gene Hackman and Betsy, hand in hand, silently watching the investigation unfold, unraveling the mysteries surrounding their final moments. Chapter 5. The Unlocked Door. Who left? Who stayed? The dark wooden door, covered in the dust of time, opened to a narrow, suffocating gap. The faint light of the late afternoon filtered through the crack, casting a hazy streak on the cold tile floor. That was how the first investigators saw the home of Gene and Betsy Hackman on that fateful afternoon. No doors were locked, no chains, no barriers separating the outside world from the two lifeless bodies inside. For anyone who had ever known Gene Hackman, this was completely out of character. At any age, Gene had always been obsessed with security. During his years under the Hollywood spotlight, he received countless threatening letters from obsessive fans and had to face photographers willing to do anything to invade the private lives of famous stars. Even after stepping away from the limelight and moving to Santa Fe, Gene continued the nightly ritual of checking the doors. His friends used to joke that he locked the doors so carefully that even Betsy, if she spent too long picking flowers in the garden, would have to knock several times to get back into the house. Yet, on that day, the front door was unlocked. The door leading to the backyard was only slightly ajar, revealing a patch of withered grass blown by the wind. There were no signs of a break-in, no strange mud stains, no suspicious footprints. Everything was eerily silent. The only thing left were the doors open, almost as if someone had hurriedly left or intentionally left behind a wordless message. Betsy Hackman, according to neighbors, had a fear of strangers. She rarely opened the door to anyone who hadn't called ahead. Even delivery workers were only allowed to leave packages outside the gate. Because of this, when news of the unlocked doors leaked, local media immediately raised suspicions. Was there a third party present in the house that day? Someone familiar enough that Gene and Betsy didn't feel the need to be cautious, yet also someone who witnessed or became involved in the final tragedy? There were no signs of a struggle, no belongings disturbed, and every corner of the house remained as tidy as if the couple had just finished lunch and suddenly vanished from this world. This quickly dismissed the hypothesis of a break-in or attack. But what could be more terrifying than violence? It was the silent presence of someone who knew the house well, who understood Gene and Betsy, who knew every little habit of theirs, a person who didn't need to break the door, didn't need to search for anything because their very presence was the answer. The investigation team reviewed the security camera system in the area. Santa Fe wasn't equipped with many surveillance cameras, but in a quiet neighborhood, Most of the surrounding households had basic recording devices installed. The data from the 24 hours prior to the discovery of the body was collected and analyzed, with each frame slowed down. The result: no suspicious individuals were recorded entering or leaving Gene and Betsy's home, no strangers, no unusual vehicles, no strange sounds. This led to an even more chilling hypothesis. Was someone inside the house, staying for an extended period before leaving without leaving a trace? Or was there a hand that intervened, erasing all evidence and causing the camera system to go blind at the most critical moment? Amid the storm of speculation, one persistent question crept into the mind of every investigator. If Gene and Betsy weren't the last to lock the door, then who opened it? And why? Why, in a house that had been securely locked for years, was the door left ajar that day, as if waiting for someone to return? As the last light of day faded on the threshold, it felt as though the door didn't just open to the outside world, but to a dark secret, where truth and lies, life and death, merged into a maze from which there was no escape. Chapter 6. Echoes from Mudro, the haunting in the final recording. The small, cramped room, barely large enough for an old wooden shelf, on which sat a few pairs of sneakers and worn rubber boots, still stained with dried mud from the backyard. This was Mudro, a space Gene Hackman had rarely spent time in during his life, yet it became the place where he collapsed. His body contorted into an odd position, his thin hand still gripping the phone, a silent witness holding the unsaid words of his final moments. Why was Gene there? What could have driven a 94-year-old man, once a star who walked the prestigious red carpets, to fall in such a confined space, used only for storing shoes and umbrellas? The crime scene investigators spent hours examining every tiny detail. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no evidence of a life-or-death battle. Only a chilling silence, as if Gene had stepped into Mudro carrying an invisible fear, only to collapse right at the threshold. The first hypothesis suggested that Gene tried to run out the front door to seek help, but at that moment, the door was ajar, not locked. This completely contradicted Gene's survival instinct, as he was always obsessed with locking the doors at night. If Gene truly wanted to seek help from outside, why didn't he run to the garden, just a few steps from the main road? Why did he stop in Mudro, the only room without windows and no way to see outside? The second hypothesis was even more chilling. Gene hadn't gone outside to escape. He was running from something within his own home, from something he had either heard or witnessed just before collapsing. The forensic team had searched all of Mudro, every pair of shoes, every small trace of mud, but found nothing unusual. However, as they continued to examine the phone in Gene's hand, the door to the true secret began to open. The phone wasn't just a means of communication, it was a silent witness to Gene Hackman's final moments. The phone still had battery, but the lock screen wouldn't open. The investigators used special techniques to back up all the data on the device, searching for recent calls, unsent messages, even audio recording apps or personal logs. Then they discovered a short audio file, a recording that lasted less than 11 seconds, but enough to send chills down the spine of even the toughest. The recording began with heavy, labored, and broken breaths. as if Gene was struggling to swallow the fear rising in his throat. His voice trembled, fragmented, but one sentence rang out clearly amid the chaotic sounds. "Something's wrong with Betsy. I can't breathe." Immediately after those words, there was no loud noise, no objects falling, no screams or struggles, only a silence that lasted for 3 seconds, followed by a small click, the sound of a finger tapping the phone screen. The location data from the phone also revealed something puzzling. Just minutes before the recording was made, Gene's location moved from the living room into Mudro, with no indication he went upstairs or stepped into the garden. The entire house seemed to have trapped him in a closed loop, unable to escape. The investigation team immediately expanded their search to include Betsy's phone, hoping to find signs of contact between the couple in those final moments. However, Betsy's phone had mysteriously shut off the night before. No calls, no messages, no apps open, almost as if someone had deliberately erased every trace from her device. Why did Gene Hackman hold the phone, recording a brief panicked clip before collapsing in Mudro, a place where no one in the house had ever stayed long? What had he heard? What had he seen? Or had his own hand accidentally uncovered a truth that had never been revealed? Outside Mudro, the front door remained slightly ajar. The cold breeze of the late afternoon slipped through the crack, like the breath of an unseen stranger, witnessing the final act of Gene Hackman's life, but never revealing itself. As night descended on Santa Fe, the phone rang in the wooden house, breaking the silence. On the other end, Gene Hackman's voice trembled, no longer the warm, resonant sounds of a legend, but the faint whisper of a man facing his final moment. "Betsy, I'm sorry, I can't." A choked sob, followed by silence. The call ended, but those words hung in the air like a belated confession, like an explanation left unfinished. In the mysterious case surrounding Gene Hackman's death, an unexpected piece of evidence stood out: the final call he made. What initially seemed like a moment of panic and desperation turned out to be a crucial clue, helping to unravel the chilling truth behind his death. In this video, we will dive into the investigation and explore how that brief 11-second call ultimately helped investigators discover the true cause of his death. If you find this case full of surprises and hidden twists, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated on the next exciting investigations. Subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on any other intriguing stories. See you in the next video.